As a reenactor, one of the most common questions we get asked is, what did the symbols on the shields mean? And, well, that's what I'm going to attempt to answer for you today. The answer is unfortunately not as simple as the shields meant this and this design meant that. There's a lot of grey area and sort of educated guesses and speculation that go into answering that question of what these blazons, is what we call them, what the blazons mean. There are a few leading theories and a few historical nudges that I will be sort of mentioning today to hopefully give you a better idea of what we believe these blazons and symbols sort of meant and stood for in the hoplite phalanx. Now, to either side of me, you can see sort of two different types of shield designs, one of them being a sort of geometric solar symbol, a star, and the other being a very famous Gorgonian. We sort of see a lot of different types of blazons and designs on shields, from geometric patterns to mythical beasts to helmets to satires with questionable members. We see a lot of disparity and a lot of uniqueness within this, which sort of fits in with the rest of the hoplite. And I mention this a lot in all of my other previous videos in this sort of style. Hoplites were not professional soldiers, they were citizen militia forces essentially, who would have to afford and purchase all of their own equipment and arms, which then resulted in a lot of personalization and customized sort of pieces of that. And that sort of brings us on to one of our leading theories, which is that it was just that, something which the hoplite wanted to paint on his shield. Maybe there was a religious meaning to that, maybe there was a spiritual meaning to that, but it was essentially something that that hoplite felt that they wanted to paint. Maybe it was a gorgon they thought would strike fear into their enemy if they were staring at it in the face. Maybe the solar symbol can sort of relate to Apollo, or maybe it's a distraction for archers and make them more likely to hit the shield, or it might disorientate your enemy, or it's just a design that you liked. Maybe you painted a dog on your shield because you have a beloved companion that you want to take with you on campaign, and sort of the options are endless. We have a description from Plutarch who writes about a Spartan who painted a life-sized fly on his shield, who supposedly wanted to get so close to his enemy that the fly appeared to them as a lion or as true form. Different sort of translations use different words. So we do have period descriptions of what seemed to be personal choice on what these blazons were. Another theory is that they are perhaps sort of a heraldric sort of symbol. Perhaps your family sort of had an animal or a symbol that sort of every generation of your family had. So perhaps the boar was sort of your family crest, or this specific sort of symbol is what your family used. So perhaps it's sort of a family crest, a heraldric symbol similar to sort of later medieval style designs that sort of pass on through a family. And another very popular theory is that they were religious, which likely a lot of them do have a lot of religious connotation. As I said earlier, the royal star here, the sort of solar symbol, is commonly associated with the god Apollo. You could see boars for Ares, you could see the eagle for Zeus, obviously the owl for Athena. We see a lot of sort of different creatures and different symbols that have meaning and significance to the gods they have worshipped at the time. So perhaps you could have painted the eagle of Zeus if you wanted Zeus to favour you and look out for you in battle, or it was simply the god that you dedicated yourself to the most. A very popular design that we often see is the very famous Spartan lambda and the Club of Heracles for Thebes. We do have, I think, one or two descriptions of the Laconians wearing the lambda on the shield. However, no mention at all to the Spartans necessarily having them. This is a later source, a Peloponnesian warrior source. And what I personally believe, and what many other scholars believe, is that it was actually a state-issued shield. So the L, the lambda, stood for Laconia, and during the Peloponnesian War, where Laconia was having to muster many more soldiers to fight in the massive war, was essentially saying, you were too poor to afford your own equipment, here's a shield, here's a spear, get out there and fight. The lambda standing for the Laconian shield that was given to residents of Laconia by essentially Laconian governments. So not likely the Spartans, which is kind of ironic how the lambda has sort of become so associated with the Spartans, the upper class, when it was likely used by such like lower class citizens or residents that they couldn't even afford their own equipment at all. Now, of course, it's very difficult for us to give a concrete answer, and likely all of these could have been the case. Some of these could have been the case. There might have been other reasons as well that we haven't really thought of. And it also quite possibly changed over time. But again, the sort of stance that I take on most of it is that it was up to the wearer's or the owner's choice as to what he decided went on his shield. If he wanted a religious symbol, for instance, the royal star, he'd paint that on it. If he wanted a dog, he'd paint that on it. If he wanted an octopus, he'd paint that on it. If he wanted a helmet, he painted that on it. If he was a bit of a jokester and he wanted a satire with a ginormous certain body parts, he would paint that on there as well. The fly, for example. So we sort of see this trend of individualized elements of the hoplites panoply, which is where I tend to sit, is that it was likely at the end of the day down to your choice. Maybe you would have got tent mates or messmates that decided to sort of paint the same design. We have some people suggesting that the Spartan Morai and Lokoi had the same shield blazons, but there's really no evidence for that at all. And in artwork, we see a lot of disparity and individuality within basically every depiction. Something that is also important to note is that it's highly likely that lots of these shields didn't actually have a blazon on it at all. They might have been blank. If you weren't very artistically minded and you didn't want to spend the money to get someone to professionally paint your Aspis device, your blazon, then you would likely have just left it blank, which doesn't look as cool in artwork, so most vase depictions show quite elaborate designs. And that poses an issue as well for us when we're trying to recreate these blazons, which are, do we take vase depictions and transfer them onto our shields, sort of more like this one? Or do we elaborate it and sort of go, well, vase paintings aren't realism, so perhaps these sort of blazons were more realistic. And that's why I actually I like the look of this design. It was also found in Messenia, so it's Spartan sort of territory. But I like the geometric symbols because there's sort of less of a question of, is that what it would have looked like? Because it is just a geometric pattern, as opposed to if you could look at a lion or a bull, is it really that sort of vase art replicated in real life, or could it have been more of a, not necessarily realism, but, you know, a little bit more realistic and shaded and everything like that. So there's another sort of issue that we have. If you go with something like this, that is very similar to ancient Greek art, then at least the artwork on your shield fits in with period sources and would fit in the time, even if it was a little bit obscure. But of course, if you decide to go for the more realism route, it could have fit in, but it also might not be the art style at the time. And I think it's highly likely that we would have seen certain individuals try and sort of replicate what they see in vase, like the same way that modern people today sort of replicate clothing that they see in modern media and artwork and film. So there's really a lot of questions there, but at the end of the day, to answer the question of what did the symbols on hoplite shields mean, we don't know, but these are sort of our best guesses, which likely did sort of take place in the world of ancient Greece. Thank you very much for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it and learned something. If you do have any questions about anything I've said, or even stuff that I haven't said, feel free to drop them below and I'll try my best to answer them. Thank you very much to our members for going the extra mile and supporting the channel. And thank you everyone for watching this video. I'll hopefully see you in the next one. If you want to check out our previous videos where we sort of cover the whole hoplite, I'll link down below the video where I go over all of the armor of the ancient Greek hoplite, and also where I go over weaponry as well. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll hopefully see you in the next one.